WGSN-DB Going Solo Network welcomes you to the Relationship Recovery Show with your host, Shan White, divorce recovery coach, who helps people create the life they see when they close their eyes and dream. Let's listen in as we hear about techniques, tools, and strategies to recover and heal from a relationship due to breakup, divorce, or even death. Here's Shan now.
Hey there, this is Shan White, host of Divorce and Relationship Recovery. I'm so glad you guys got to join us today because I have the most wonderful guest. Marlene and I have gotten to know each other over, oh my goodness, for some time now because we both have a passion as divorce coaches in helping folks move up, move on. So Marlene Bizbub has earned a doctorate degree in, listen to this, forensic psychology from Eisner Institute for Professional Studies and a master's degree in counseling and gerontology. If I said that right, Marlene, you'll correct me in a minute. From Wichita State University. She has over 30 years of experience as a therapist, college instructor, family preservation specialist, court evaluator, and spent nearly 20 years serving as an evaluator for the courts in family law cases before becoming speaker, author, and private consultant in the area of divorce, blended families, and family law issues. Boy, so does this gal have some experience? Do we want to listen in or what? Her new book, by the way, Contentious Custody, Is It Really in the Best Interest of Your Children, has just been released. So as a certified divorce coach, Dr. Marlene has such a passion for helping people through the process in a peaceful and dignified manner. Marlene, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here.
Well, I understand that today you're going to be helping all of us and our listeners talk about a subject that's very near and dear to your heart, and that is advice to divorcing parents. So, and you've got several different really great helpful pointers. So you know what? Let's dig in. What's the first thing that divorcing parents need to know or understand, Marlene?
Well, I do have such a passion for taking care of children through this process, and I love working with divorcing parents for this reason. And the first thing that I tell them, kind of first and foremost, is refrain from exposing children to adult issues.
Now, so tell me, how does exposing them to adult issues affect them?
When they know all the adult stuff, they know everything going on, which they shouldn't. They're kids, and they need to be allowed to be kids. But when they know all of that, they be what we call parental. And this can mean a couple of different things. They might take care of their younger siblings, or they might take care of their parents even. I had a case a few years ago, quite a few years ago, where I had an 11-year-old girl who knew everything about what both mom and dad were doing. And she wasn't in a healthy place. It was not a good place for her to be. Mom was having affairs, Dad was going out drinking with his friends, and she knew it all. So I talked to the parents and told them, this is not a good place for your daughter to be. The good thing was they agreed. The bad thing was she wasn't willing to give that up. Kids who become parentified, they want to be there. They want to know everything. And when I sat down with her and her parents, and I said, I've talked to your parents, and they're not going to share everything with you anymore, she wasn't happy. And she said, but I need to know what's going on with my parents. I need to know. And I said, no, you don't. You need to be allowed to be a kid. And I will tell you, she wasn't happy with me, but 5 years later, she walked in my office. She said, do you remember me? And of course I said, oh yes, I remember you. And she said, I hated you when you worked with my family. And I said, yes, I knew that too. And she said, but I want to thank you because you were the only person who allowed me to be a kid. And we just have to let them be kids. They don't need to become parentified at 11 or 10 or 13 or 15.
Well, that's such a very good point. And it reminds me of Dr. Phil saying something along the same line about not making children have adult problems or not bringing adult subjects into children's lives. And boy, is that such a great point. Well, tell me more. What's the next one, Marlene?
Don't speak negatively to your children about the other parent.
And so what's the harm in speaking negatively about the other parent?
Well, besides, just the common sense, that isn't a good idea. I mean, I would agree with that. But specifically, children, especially when they're very young, derive their identity from both of their parents. When kids are 4, 5, 6, they don't have their own identity. They derive their identity from their parents. So when you put down one of the parents, you are actually putting down the child as well. And they feel like, if dad's bad, I must be bad. If mom is this, I must be that. And so it affects their self-esteem.
So true. Now tell me, I have found with other professionals that, like you talked about, fast forward later on in years, the effects of the children. Have you found what I have heard before, that when you're speaking negatively about a parent to your child, that later on in years, they end up resenting that parent for...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You will actually end up turning them against you, because they're going to get old enough to realize what you did. And they're going to resent you. And it's going to negatively affect your relationship with them. So you might think at age 6, you can turn them against mom or turn them against dad. But at 16 or 18 or 20, they're going to remember that and they're going to resent you.
I completely believe it. And you know what? Even if you happen to have the tendency of being a bad mouther or a gossiper, that is reason enough to stop it, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, tell us more. What's the next great piece of advice you've got?
Well, going along with that, with not speaking negatively about the other parent, don't make your children feel as though they have to choose between their parents. The greatest gift you can give them is to allow them to love both parents.
Well, tell me, Marlene, what effect does it have on kids to make them feel that they have to choose on the opposite end of the spectrum?
Well, it compromises their loyalty to each parent. They feel a loyalty to both parents. So when you put them in a position to have to choose, it compromises their loyalty to that parent. And then they feel guilty. Kids have told me they've laid awake in bed at night feeling bad about something they said. It just isn't healthy. And kids have a conscience. And when they say something negative, they might go along with you at the time and say something negative about the other parent, but then they're laying in bed that night feeling bad and sad and feeling remorseful because they love that parent, and yet in the moment they were going along with you and they put them down. And you just can't make them choose. Again, you have to allow them to love both parents.
So instead of helping them be relieved of some of the normal negative emotions, anger, stress, fear, confusion, doubt, during the divorce process, the parent, you're actually inadvertently increasing those negative emotions.
Yes, you're feeding into it or keeping it on, and that's just not healthy for them.
And of course, I can't imagine any parent out there in our listening audience ever intentionally wanting to cause harm to their children. But that's why this is such a great conversation for us all to learn how it is that we are inadvertently, unconsciously, and unintentionally causing additional burdens and stress to our kids, which we would never want to do, right?
Correct. Yeah, parents don't intentionally do this a lot of times. They might just be speaking to a friend or speaking to someone on the phone, and they're not thinking about the fact that their child can hear them.
that's why this conversation is so important. I am so honored to have you. Okay, so what's the next step?
A really big one that I've seen a lot of problems with over the years is be sensitive to the manner in which you introduce a new significant other to your children. So if you get a new boyfriend or girlfriend, first of all, don't introduce them to every single person that you date.
So why would that not be beneficial to the child?
I know, it sounds like the more adults they have in their lives, the better. You know, the more people that love them, the better. But what happens when it's a significant other is they will actually develop an attachment to a parental figure. And that's different than an attachment to a neighbor. Because I have people say, well, we have neighbors move and we have, church friends come and go. Well, that's different. They can withstand a neighbor moving. They might be sad, but they can withstand that. When it's a parental figure, they actually develop an attachment to them that goes beyond your average association you have with a person. So they are going to suffer a loss when you take that person to whom they're attached and remove them from their life.
Well, that is so good. Have you, and I know each person is different, Marlene, but is it possible you could give us maybe just kind of an average or perhaps a range of time where it might be more appropriate after dating someone to start to introduce them to that significant other?
Yes, and there's not really an exact length of time, like you can't really say, well, 6 months or a year. The thing you want to gauge this by is when they appear to be adjusted to the divorce. And what I mean by that is when you get a divorce or you separate from someone, you've been thinking about it for a long time. You've been preparing. Mentally, you are down the road, but the child is not. They don't know that you've been thinking about this. They don't know you've been planning it. There's things that you had to do to prepare to separate. So, again, you've been thinking about it for a long time. They have not. When you feel that they have adjusted to living in two households and, we're not going to spend Christmas with both mom and dad here, then you can slowly begin to introduce them to people. And another thing I tell people to do is make sure, and of course we're never sure, make as sure as, be as sure as you can that you're going to be with this person for a while. You don't want a string of people in and out of their life. So make sure that you're going to be in a committed relationship and the person's going to be around for a while before you introduce your children to them.
Great suggestion, Marlene. Well, you are listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We're going to take a quick break, but hold on. We'll be back in a second.
You're listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, Singles Talk Radio channel, where we take a lighthearted and candid approach to discussions on the journey of relationship loss, divorce, parenting, being single, relationships building, dating, and yes, sex. Join our listeners and begin living your best life.
You're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is Shan, your host of Relationship Recovery. Tonight we're talking with Marlene Bizbub, who is talking to us about advice to divorcing parents, such a hugely important topic. So, Marlene, you know what? We might even have enough time to just, for those audience members who perhaps are just joining in, give us just like a 1-second recap on what we've talked about so far, if you don't mind. Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
No, that's fine. So far we've talked about not exposing children to adult issues, not speaking negatively about the other parent, or going along with that, not making your children feel as though they have to choose between their parents, and being sensitive to the manner in which you introduce new boyfriends or girlfriends, a new significant other to your children. And that was where we left off. And actually, I have a story, if we have time for this.
We do.
Okay. My own son, I have lived this as well. You can't really give advice to parents going through a divorce if you haven't been through a divorce yourself. And I went through this with my own son. He was very young, about 4 or 5, and I had a boyfriend in my life. And I thought this guy and I were going to be together for a while. Well, it didn't turn out that way. But I had introduced my son to him, and every evening we would have dinner with this man, and we would go out to his house, and my son loved to look in his backyard for frogs. He had a little pond in his backyard, and my son would go out and look for frogs while he and I fixed dinner, and, then we would spend the evening with him. Well, the guy and I broke up, and I remember it was for weeks that I would pick my son up, and when he would get in the car, he would say, Mom, are we going to go to JC's house and look for frogs in the backyard? Are we going to go to JC's house? It broke my heart.
Oh.
I had caused my son to suffer a loss and to lose something that he enjoyed doing, even if it's looking for frogs in the backyard. So we really have to think about what we're doing to them when we handle things such as this with our children.
I love that you really stepped on that point, Marlene, because I too have been through a divorce, didn't have kids, but I do understand the dynamics of we adults, divorcing adults, rightfully so, have so much on our plates and on our minds and on our hearts that it is so easy to become so focused on ourselves and what we're going through and the divorce and all of the things that involves, sometimes changing of residences, schools, fighting for finances and things like that we sometimes do lose that ability to focus on the children and how it's affecting them. And I first of all, I thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that story, because there may be somebody out there right now that's listening in that's thinking, I wonder if it's time to introduce them, or perhaps they didn't even think about the fact that, maybe there should be some consideration before I just nilly-willy introduce them to Bob, Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for any parent out there that's listening in, wouldn't it be better to err on the side of caution than to have your child coming to you months later and saying, when are we going to go look for frogs again? That, you're right, that had to have just broken your heart, and no parent would ever want to intentionally inflict that kind of emotional pain on their child, would they?
No. And you made a really good point there, that parents are so caught up in what they have to do to get through this, that they forget about their kids and taking care of their emotional needs.
It's so true. So tell us, Marlene, what other great piece of advice do you have for our divorcing parents?
Yes. Well, and going along with what I just said about taking care of their emotional needs instead of what we need, don't use your children to relay messages to the other parent or to give them things like child support payments or anything. This is adult work, and it needs to be done by adults.
Now, how could that be potentially harmful to the child?
Well, because you're placing them in the middle of your conflict. They don't know what it is you're asking them to give the other parent. And so they don't know how the other parent's going to react when they receive this. And they shouldn't have to be placed in that position of handing something to a parent and them going, really? Your dad had to send this to me right now? Or however they react. Kids just shouldn't have to be exposed to that. That is adult work.
You're right. It is adult work. And you know what? I can envision it right now, Marlene, where, say, like you said, an example is, the dad thinks it's an innocent thing to put a check in a sealed envelope. Seems pretty innocent, right? And the child takes the envelope to the mom, and the mom opens up the envelope, and perhaps the amount of the check was different, what they agreed upon. And the mom, the immediate response is, going to be right in front of the child, not, their knee jerk reacting and like, oh my gosh, that jerk is supposed to be 350, it's 300. How am I going to pay? And I can hear it, can't you?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the envelope because I had a dad one time who said to me, he was rather smug when I said, don't send things through the kids. He said, well, I sealed the envelope. And I said, really? Now you really sparked their curiosity. Because kids are curious and they're going to wonder what was so important that it had to be in a sealed envelope. And the minute mom goes to take her shower, the kid is probably in there rummaging through her stuff to see what it was. It was so secretive that it had to be in a sealed envelope. So just don't do it.
That makes perfect sense because, that is the natural curiosity, not only of a child, but an adult too. Because you tell us, don't open it or don't look at it. What's the first thing we're going to want to do? Isn't that human nature?
Yes, it is. Exactly.
Love it. Good stuff. All right. What's some other advice we can use to help our divorcing parents?
One that is really big because it tends to come up a lot is be sensitive to the fact that the children may try to manipulate the situation.
Oh, well, how could they manipulate a situation?
Well, for example, if they know the two of you are not talking, you're not communicating, they're going to come back and say, well, Dad lets me stay up until 10 o'clock on weeknights. And so you, of course, want to be as happy to be in your home as the other parent's home. And if you aren't talking, you don't know the difference. And you say, oh, okay, well then, yeah, sure, 10 o'clock's okay, I guess. And next thing you know, you're hearing from Dad's attorney that contacted your attorney, if you have attorneys, and they're complaining because you're letting the kids stay up until 10 o'clock. Well, you went on face value of what the child told you that the other parent was allowing that. Which, first of all, you shouldn't make decisions based on what you think the other parent is doing or not doing anyway. But kids will try to manipulate. They will tell you, well, Dad lets me. So then you think, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you can play that mature game when you're 6, or whatever it is that they're trying to get you to let them do. You've got to be one step ahead of them. So just be aware that they may try to manipulate. And if you aren't sure they're telling you the truth, email the other parent. Say, hey, Bobby said you're letting him play, Call of Duty or whatever. I don't know the games, but whatever game you don't want them to play. And make sure Dad really did let them because chances are Dad didn't.
Well, and I love the fact that you give an example of even perhaps emailing or even texting because there are so many couples that are involved in a divorce that they want to have no communication with them whatsoever, especially talking with them. But if it's that type of relationship, like you said, you can always communicate in different forms where you're not even having to discuss issues voice to voice. A quick email, a quick text will suffice just as well to get the information for the best interest of your child. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. We love email and text because it takes the emotion out of it.
Absolutely. And so now you're not entrapping yourself in an emotionally volatile conversation, but you're still able to get the information that is needed once again for the best interest in for the child.
Yes, that is correct.
Love it. All right. Do you have anything else for us?
I've got one more thing.
Yay!
Provide reassurance to your children that both parents still love them. And don't assume that you know how they feel. You might think, oh, they know that we both still love them. They may not know that. They may think, if mommy can stop loving daddy or daddy can stop loving mommy, maybe they're going to stop loving me too. So remind them both parents still love them. The parent did not leave the children. They left the other parent. So it's really important to convey to your children Mommy and Daddy both still love you. We're both still going to be in your life. And again, don't assume that you know how they feel.
Well, and we all know the old expression of what happens when we assume, and obviously the harm that could be done there. And so on the other side of the coin, what do we want our children to feel?
We want them to know that whatever they are feeling is okay. It is fine to miss Mom or miss Dad or feel sad, that their feelings are valid, and we have to validate them. We have to hear them. We have to listen to them. Let them express how they feel. And because they say to you, I sure miss the other parent, doesn't mean they don't love you. That just means something is missing. And when they're with that other parent, they're probably saying the same thing, that they miss you.
Absolutely. Well, Marlene, I cannot thank you enough. And for all of our listeners out there that want to take a little deeper dive with you as a certified divorce coach, how can they reach out to you, Marlene, and get a hold of you?
Yes, they can either do that on my website, which is www.marlenebizub, MARLENE, B as in boy, IZUB as in boy.com. Or my email address, which is drmarlene at marlenebizub, marlenebizub.com. Or they could also call my phone, which is 719-641-5403. And again, that was 719-641-5403.
Marlene, thank you. And I hope our folks do reach out to you because you've got a wealth of wisdom to share. You're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is Shan, host of Relationship Recovery. Talk to you next week.